Hello, I'm Joel Crews. I'm editor of Meat and Poultry, and I thank you for joining us. Today's expert viewpoint comes from Dr. Alissa Welsher, a senior consultant at Elanco Poultry Food Safety. Dr. Welsher received her bachelor's degree in biological sciences from the University of Pittsburgh and a master's in poultry science and doctorate in cell and molecular biology from the University of Arkansas. Her area of expertise is food safety, specializing in integrated pest management. So to set the stage for our discussion today, as most of you all know, managing today's poultry production facilities means a lot more than just eliminating insects. Without the right controls, pests can negatively impact biosecurity, salmonella load, and overall bird performance. Unfortunately, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. So today we're focusing on how producers can develop an effective pest control strategy, knowing that typically they aren't fighting just one pest at a time. Dr. Welsher will guide us through some of the scenarios and factors that go into choosing the right insecticide, proper application practices, and how to respond when efforts fall short. So, Dr. Welsher, let's just get right into it. When a producer's dealing with multiple pest issues, how should they prioritize their control efforts? And how should they view the different factors at play when deciding on the most effective insecticide?
So when a producer is dealing with multiple pest pressures, they really want to look at which pests they're looking at, right? So the main ones that we see are going to be darkling beetles, flies, house flies, and rodents. Whenever you're looking at the factors that kind of guide you in which pressure is really taking over that barn, you're going to want to look at damage of birds. You're going to look at feed wastage, and you're going to want to look at disease transmission. So I'll take darkling beetles, for example. They pose a really good risk on salmonella transmission, on avian influenza transmission. And the big thing with these guys is there are millions of them within a house. And so because of that, that disease spread can actually perpetrate right throughout the entire house. And you're kind of looking at, not just one disease that they carry at a time, they carry multiple diseases. Not only do they carry multiple diseases, but they also damage structural components of the house. So they're going to chew through things like insulation, sill sealer. They're going to chew through roofing as well. And so that type of a behavior from just one of those multiple pests, you can kind of look at and see how important it is to really choose the correct insecticide or rodenticide, to take care of the problem. And those factors that really are guiding in that selection of the most effective insecticide are going to be things like, what was your your past history of chemical usage? It's going to look at the life cycle stage of those insects. Flies. We know that flies reproduce very quickly. So do darkling beetles. And when we're in a house, what we tend to try to look at is, what is the stage that this darkling beetle is in? We can see several, larval stages, which just means that, when they hatch out of the egg, they don't just hatch out as a full grown larva. They hatch out as a small larva, and then they tend to grow over time. And as that larva matures, it then pupates, kind of like a similar to a butterfly process. And then it will pupate and emerge from that pupa as an adult beetle. But those adult beetles actually change color as they get older. So as we walk into a house, we can look at a darkling beetle and say, okay, you guys have a new hatch, as well as you have some older adult individuals in the house. You still have a breeding population, then you have a future generation coming up. And we can kind of give some advice as to kind of how best to control those different life cycle stages. And just so that everybody can kind of say, okay, we can use a larvicide and we can use an adulticide. And the good thing about a lot of these insecticides is if you're having a problem with darkling beetles, but you're also having a fly problem as well, a lot of these insecticides will handle both flies as well as darkling beetles kind of at the same time. And so you kind of get a more bang for your buck whenever you're looking at a lot of these insecticides and handling that pest presence.
So, if a producer finds that insecticides are not working, what are some of the common root causes that they should be investigating?
Yeah, so that's a great question. A lot of the time, it can be, just what was the history of use of your chemical class. So people might be rotating by active ingredient instead of actual chemical class. And active ingredient, it's easy to think that that's the right one to rotate by because it's right there on the front of the label. And if you're saying, I had this product and it was this active ingredient, and now this new product is this active ingredient, so I switched. The problem is that the active ingredients have something called a chemical class to which they belong to. And those chemical classes are just basically the way in which they act on the insect. And so that's really their mode of action. And if you continue with that same mode of action for getting rid of the insect, they eventually develop some type of a population pressure, right? And then a resistance gene to that, basically what it is that's hurting it. And so what we want to do is we want to kind of trick the insect's genetics by then saying, okay, instead of continually using this certain mode of action, we'll then use a different one and kind of keep rotating between those different chemical classes so that it tricks the kind of population pressure, so to speak, and it still becomes effective. And all of those insecticides that we have can maintain their effectiveness against those populations. And I would say one other area to kind of keep an eye out for is just making sure that when an applicator is applying the product, that not only is it being applied correctly, so, out basically on the wall and then out into the litter about 2 to 3 feet in both directions. You also want to make sure that they're mixing the chemicals properly, and that, things such as water, do they bring their own water with them, or do they use well water that's on site, or does the site have city water? A lot of the times our water, the pH can be a little bit off for what that insecticide likes to kind of be mixed with. Most insecticides like an acidic environment, but sometimes we have a basic environment. And really to kind of combat that and fix that problem, a lot of applicators know this. They'll either add citric acid or some type of an acid to make a basic solution a little more acidic. And then to make something basic that's more acidic, they're going to, they'll add in like a citric acid, and then they'll add in ammonia to make it more basic. And so these producers, they usually work pretty closely with their applicators so that they know kind of which type of water they have, what that pH is. But if they don't, we want to make sure that that's an option that they're looking at as well.
Okay, very good. So what are some of the step-by-step best practices for proper insecticide applications in a poultry house?
Mm-hmm. So whenever they are applying, we kind of first look at, okay, well, what were those chemical classes that we mentioned, right? And what was the history of use? Once we pick our insecticide, we want to make sure that the applicator knows, the mixing instructions. Do we want a high rate? Do we want a low rate? And, that their nozzles, everything is correctly working, and that they spray, the house usually along the sidewalls and then under the feeders is it's called band application. That's usually a very standard application that they'll do. Sometimes if it's a dust or, some type of another material where they can fog it in, or they will dust, they usually do a whole house application. Boric acid, diatomaceous earth, those tend to also be whole house applications to really make sure that wherever those pests are coming from and where they're settling, that they're actually being touched by that insecticide. But we want to make sure too that when we first go into a producer, we will tend to do an evaluation where we walk in and we walk through the houses and we make sure that, okay, that insecticide you're currently on is working. Or is there an issue? Did we see an uptick in the population? And so now we need to look at chemical classes. And what we'll do then is we'll actually take a sample of that population within the house and we'll send it off to a third-party lab. And then they'll give us a sensitivity report, which basically just tells us what chemical that population is the most sensitive to in the house. And then they can better decide which insecticide is going to work for them at that time.
Interesting. Almost a CSI approach for pests.
Yes, right, exactly.
So what would you say, what's at stake, or what are some of the longer term implications of if there's a consistent pest presence in a poultry house environment?
Yeah, so there are a lot of implications to it, depending again on the pest, whether it's rodents or insects, or even wild animals like wild birds, right? We're all gonna look at some type of a disease potential. Okay, now is the disease potential for the birds? Is it for humans? And a lot of these vectors, what we call the pests, like they will harbor a lot of different diseases and pathogens, and a lot of them, such as darkling beetles and flies. That's what we're going to see a lot of in the poultry house. They harbor a lot of diseases that are important in poultry. So Newcastle disease, IBD, Rio, avian influenza. They do contain the protozoa that causes blackhead as well. So we really want to make sure that, we are cleaning out our houses. We are using insecticides or rodenticides to get rid of these pests that are, carrying some of these pathogens. And another really big piece of it is, what we're trying to do on the processing plant side is obviously lower salmonella that comes into the plant, and that obviously makes it out to where the consumer is. And so a way to do that is on the live side. We have vaccines and we have litter amendments and things like that that can help as well. But insects do harbor these. It is pretty fairly open knowledge that darkling beetles and flies and rodents as well carry salmonella. They carry E. coli, and we really want to make sure that we're lowering these numbers as much as we can in a facility to better kind of get control of that. And then that incoming load into the plant is lower, and the plant interventions then can do their thing and lower it completely through the plant, so that we have a very, very tight system whenever we're talking about salmonella exposure and things like that as it goes through the plant.
Okay, thank you. Can you discuss any innovations in this space, innovative solutions to target pests, like dust formulations, and how do they play a role in an overall pest control program?
Sure, yeah. So there are a lot of different types of solutions. So there are formulations like liquid, like granulars, like baits. There are a lot of dust formulations as well. We actually just came out with one recently called Silence Dust. And it is, I was talking about those classes earlier. It's a pyrethroid class, which makes it kind of broad spectrum. So it's not just going to help with darkling beetles and flies, but it'll help with things like spiders and cockroaches and fire ants and things like that as well. They tend to get into harder reach areas as well. So dusts, they kind of spread out once you apply them, and they hang in the air for a little bit, and they kind of saturate kind of that environment. And so when the dust settles, it tends to settle a little bit deeper in some of those cracks and crevices than a spray might. Sprays can usually drip in, and they can sometimes get into those cracks, but the dusts are very, very good because of their small particulate matter. They're very good at getting into those tight corners that sometimes the spray and granulars can't get into. And it's just a piece of that puzzle, right? So when we talk about rotations, we talk about, let's rotate from a neonicotinoid to an organophosphate to a spinosyn to a pyrethroid. We just want to make sure as we're rotating through that we also, again, look at the situation that we're in. If it is something like a breeder or a layer area, and say they have bed bugs or they have mites, dust formulations are good. A lot of them can be put on animal. If they can't be put on animal, they can be dusted through the house. And then those, again, get into those smaller cracks and crevices where bed bugs, and if it's a red mite, they tend to, live off animal, and they tend to live in those areas, and they just come at night to the bird to feed. And so you really want to make sure that you're kind of offering birds things like dust baths. So whether it's a dust formulation that can be on animal, can be added to that dust bath, and it can help those, those birds kind of get those mites off of them. Or if it's just something like flies and darkling beetles, you really want to make sure that, you're hitting them where they're living, whether that's cracks and crevices, whether that's, kind of high up in the roof rafters. You really want to make sure that, your strategies and what you're targeting, the species you're targeting, kind of, come together, and you can find an insecticide that matches and can really help you kind of take care of that problem.
Well, there's so much to know. This is so helpful. So for viewers that are seeking more information on effectively controlling pests in their poultry houses, we're going to include some of Elanco's online resources and contact information here on the screen. And with that, I'd like to thank Dr. Welsher for sharing her insights and her expertise with us. And I'd like to thank you for joining us today.